There was a practice I had many years ago that I found extremely helpful at some difficult and challenging moments of my life, and I've shared it with other people. I've never really shared what I had done, but shared the process with people along the way who were really struggling with life. And what I started to do, obviously, I was in ministry at the time, and I felt I felt like I was never understood. I felt like I wasn't being heard, I wasn't being listened to, and I didn't know what to do with that. Uh, led to depression, led to just really being down and not knowing how to get out, not knowing how to find a way out. And so I started writing letters to God. I think there was a movie at one point with that title, um, song, movie. I'm not even entirely sure. Because I needed someone to listen to me. I wanted someone to hear me, and I didn't know anyone that would listen without judging me. It just felt, obviously now I could look back and say I had so much judgment towards myself that anything anyone said was always being viewed through that lens. If it was positive, it was like, no, there's no way that it could possibly, that possibly describes me. And so I started writing these letters to God. I would bet it's if I put them all together at this point, it would probably surpass that of a Rima paper. I think a Rima paper has about 500 pages of just very personal, intimate thoughts from my own life and the darkness that I was experiencing and struggling. And so much of it was just untapped emotion and feeling that was inside me that I didn't always have words to. I didn't always know how to describe. And the writing gave me a path to explore what was really going on inside me. And so if you were to read those letters, I don't know, maybe one day they'll get published. I would definitely have to clean them up in order to do that. But if they ever get published, you would you would see that it was very much a reflection of everything going on within me. Even though at times it was calling out things I was experiencing in the external world, it was still a reflection of what was going on within me and this real struggle that I had. The struggle with that I had of even being a priest for so many years is all in those letters. And at one point, I started to share those letters with a therapist I had at the time for accountability, like just in case I didn't necessarily speak about something when I would go into a session. At that time, I was going weekly. At least I knew that this person was reading that and was seeing what was going on in my life. Like I just needed that. I needed someone to hear me. I needed someone to understand me. And I think one of the deep loneliness that we experience in our lives is feeling misunderstood. Really, it is such a painful act when you feel misunderstood, or when someone writes off how you feel as being, and we're good at giving trite answers. We're not comfortable with it. We're just not comfortable with pain, with someone else's suffering, with death, with any of these things that really challenge us and the way we look at life. Um, and so we come up with trite answers, trite responses to people, which often only lead us feeling worse than we were. One of the best books that I've read, and one that I've returned to many times over, Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer, speaks to that experience himself when he was in deep darkness, when he was experiencing depression in his life. There are so many people that he would not allow into his world because he would end up feeling worse after that experience than when they were there, because they would, well, go outside, the sunshine's beautiful, it's great outside, but no one was listening to him. No one was listening to the really deep pain that he was experiencing in his life. and you're left feeling misunderstood. You're left feeling as if you were just written off. And it's nothing against you. It's the uncomfortableness of the other person that's really being projected onto you more than anything, that really leads to that deeper feeling of loneliness and separation and misunderstanding. And he had one person that would come, I forget if it was daily or weekly or whatever it was, who just listened, who wouldn't say anything, who would help him with movement and keeping him active in some ways, but more than anything, didn't say anything, listened, and listened with an empathetic heart. And when we miss that in our lives, it that pain only seems to deepen. And so for me, it really, the way I got out of my own way, as my shirt says, was through writing. And I've learned that writing has been such a great tool for me to really dive into what's going on in my life, but also to be able to express it, recognizing that so much of what I'm experiencing, and I mean, I've had many people tell me this, so much of what I was experiencing myself and what I do experience even in this moment of grief that I find myself in, there's one, and if not thousands of other people out there who are experiencing the exact same thing and yet don't know how to put words to it. It's a great thing about artists. It's a great thing about musicians. Poets, they have a great way of putting words to these deeper experiences that are going on within people, that even if I'm not physically with that person, I feel like that person gets me. We did a podcast a few weeks ago with Nako, a musician. Similar type thing. The music just speaks on a very deeper level, on a deep level, and it's obvious this person has gone through great trials and tribulations in his own life, and that comes out in his music, and in those words allows it to speak to me, allows it to speak to you on that deeper level, that this person gets me, this person understands me, this person sees me, this person hears me. Like, there's such simple things that we need as human beings to make us so that we feel validated as a human being, that it's so easy to miss them. It's so easy to miss the mark because of our own insecurity, our own uncomfortableness of dealing with pain, dealing with loss, dealing with anxiety, dealing with fear, what we would call, I guess, negative emotions. And yet it's what we need. It's what we need in the moment. It really, for me, is the experience of love that people look for more than anything. It's why community was so good for me, and yet so hard at the same time. I think it's why relationships are so good and so hard, because we know we're looking for that love. We don't always know how to show it. We don't always know how to express it. But it's in those simple things of sometimes doing nothing, what appears to be nothing, by stopping, by listening, by understanding, by hearing, by seeing, by empathizing. Very simple acts as human beings that we could do for one another. And it could change someone's world. It could change your world. And so I don't even know what brought up those letters today, but while I was out driving, those letters crossed my mind, and how important they were, how important that writing was for me to be able to express. I guess at that point, it was a combination of darkness and dark night and depression. It was probably a combination of all three, and overlapping in some ways. But how important it was to have an avenue, to have an outlet, to be able to express what was going on. And it was in that writing. It wasn't always in the physical interactions with people, but it was definitely in that writing where I felt seen, where I felt heard, where I felt understood, where I felt validated as a human being. And when push comes to shove, I think that's all we want. I think that's all we really look for. And that's ultimately, that's the experience of love that we want.